Good morning. This is Jason Dean at Film Fanatic. How's it going, everyone? It is Tuesday morning, around 8:15. I've been doing these shows. I've been trying to do these videos just about every day, give or take. Every now and then, I might not have the time to do it or whatnot. But I'm trying to crank out a lot of new material, and it's a lot easier, like I've said before, to set up, and my schedule overall is really great, and it's a lot more conducive to be able to crank out content. And about 2 or 3 months ago, usually like when I go to buy movies, and I've always talked about it. I've talked about it many, many times. The two places that I always go to buy movies is usually to buy a lot of the newer Blu-rays that I review. I typically buy all those films at Bull Moose, and I go to the Bull Moose. I've been changing it up lately. I've been going to the one in Brunswick, Maine, which is really great. It's a little bit further of a drive. It's about an hour and 10 minutes or so. It's almost a little bit more than halfway to Portland, Maine. But for various reasons or whatnot, over the last few months I've been kind of down in that area, so I've been going down there. And but usually I go to the one in Waterville. That one is really awesome. I've been going to the one in Bangor. So there's still a bunch of locations. Bull Moose is still going super strong. Waterville, Bangor, Brunswick. There's one in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which I believe is the original one. And then there's one in Saco. And then I believe there's another one. I think that's all of them. There's about 5 or 6 locations. I've only been to the one in, I think it's Saco, South Portland area once, and that's actually a little bit further away. That's kind of almost on the outskirts of Portland, so it's about 2 hours. I don't really get to go down to that spot too often. I would usually, like I said, I always go to Waterville. That's usually the place. But the last couple of trips, I went to Brunswick. Brunswick's really awesome. It's kind of a newer, it's kind of a new discovery for me, just because I've realized the selection they have there is it's a smaller shop, but the selection there is pretty phenomenal. They have an amazing movie selection, and they have a really good music selection. And it's, like I've said, it's funny how each store is very different. They all have a special thing about them. The music section is good in Brunswick. The movie selection is probably overall the best in Waterville. Bangor is good too, but their music selection is probably a little bit better. They have a really good book selection. So each place is a little bit different. And each store is, as far as size goes, they're quite a bit different. So, but typically when I have a little bit extra cash and I've saved up, or from gigs or from lessons or whatnot, luckily, knock on wood, financially things have been pretty good, so I've been able to buy more movies. So it was great. I remember during when the pandemic was going pretty hardcore, and I was pretty reluctant to go out. I wasn't even really going out to rent movies. I was essentially watching all the movies that I had, which was great. But after a while, I was going pretty stir crazy, and then eventually I started going out to Opera House Video again, and I started renting movies. And then at that point, I ordered some movies through them, which they can do. But being that they're a business, when they buy movies for people, I believe it's like the wholesale price that you have to pay. So it's very expensive. It's probably in some ways, or in some terms, it's like twice the amount of money that you would spend if you were to buy them, at a regular retail place, like say Bull Moose. And then Bull Moose also, the other awesome thing about Bull Moose is they sell a lot of used stuff, so it's even marked down even more. I typically buy a lot of the newer the movies I buy. I typically buy. I got in the habit of buying unused stuff, and mostly because the prices have been just fantastic. Some of them are pretty expensive, but overall, like the prices are just phenomenal. You can buy tons of movies. I've bought tons of Blu-rays over the last few months of where they're maybe under $20, and you can find all these totally weird obscure movies, and they have a great package. They come with a great a lot of the time they come a lot of the times they come with a bonus disc, special features. It's so it's usually worth it. um and then another place I was going to a lot, which unfortunately just closed, and I went there. It closed, well, maybe a month or two ago now. But there was a place in Portland, Maine called Abraxas, which was a phenomenal store. That place was a little bit more of a specialty kind of boutique atmosphere as far as the movies that they would sell. But they had an amazing movie selection, and their whole thing was specializing in a lot of the obscure kind of grindhouse exploitation, giallo films, just and just a lot of weird kind of art house films, a lot of foreign films. They didn't really have too many films in the area of used films. A lot of imported stuff. Like I said, a lot of European movies, and so, but that place is definitely, or was, a little bit more expensive, but really worth it in a lot of ways. I would go. A band that I play in, Simplexity, about a year, well, it's, yeah, a year and a half now. Might be more. I think it's about a year and a half. And that band is the band is Simplexity, and that band is like an all original kind of jazz fusion band, and with Alan Boyer on keys, and he's like the principal writer for that band, and Michael Vickers, who is the bass player. He also started to create some of the tunes for the band and helped out a lot with the arrangements. And then also Terry Lamar, who is our percussionist, and he's great. He's an awesome dude. Love playing with him. So we lucked out. That band for a while was going through this phase of where we were trying to figure out different gigs or different venues that might be open to having something like that we do. And our music is, I think it's got a certain kind of appeal to people who might be into, maybe some hip hop and some more electronic based kind of music. But it also is very much influenced by lots of jazz. It has a lot of the tunes I feel like have a little bit of like a Charles Mingus kind of vibe, maybe a little bit of Thelonious Monk. So some of the tunes are pretty dense, but then it also has, a real, well, at least what we've tried to do with that band is, especially all of us together, we're all big fans. All the whole band, we're all big fans of a lot of electronic music, but then also a lot of hip hop. And so we tried to move the band and kind of introduce some more kind of modern sounds, like groups like Thundercat, and then things like Jay Dilla. And then I'm really coming out of the electronic world, like groups that I've talked about a lot, like Autechre. So I've tried to like push that a little bit and bring that into the band, and then give the sound, give the tunes a little bit more of a modern flavor with as far as the some of the the more kind of contemporary grooves that might be coming out of the world in like trap music and the more modern sounding hip hop stuff, and then also the more the '90s and '80s style, and kind of a little and trying to introduce elements of the DJ culture of that stuff. And we've also like Alan has expanded his setup as far as keyboards goes, where he's introduced this this kind of synth keyboard, so it definitely gives this flavor of more of a modern kind of electronica vibe, which I huge fan. So I've been really happy that we've been trying to bring that into the sound and kind of modernize it a little bit. And then the other music that we're really influenced for that band is a lot of the fusion stuff from the '70s. That's like some of my all-time favorite music. So we use a lot of like odd meters. Like a lot of the tunes are in different time signatures. We have tunes that are in 4/4 time, but then there's a lot of tunes that are in 7. 7 is used a lot in a lot of the tunes, and then there's like a few tunes in 10 and also 9 and 5/4. We just started working on a new tune that's in 11. So we're very much influenced by bands like like for me, Mahavishnu Orchestra with Billy Cobham, John McLaughlin. It's one of my all-time favorite bands. Legendary, untouchable band from the '70s that played this really intense fusion where they took elements of Eastern music, fused it with rock and roll, and fused it with jazz. And then other bands that I'm really into are like John Scofield's Blue Matter Group with Dennis Chambers, just really intense, amazing fusion stuff. Another fusion great that I've always loved. Steve Coleman, an amazing saxophone player. Some of his stuff is kind of considered like avant-garde, but he was a real amazing pioneer. I think in the fusion world, where he started introducing lots of odd meters into the context of like rock and world music, and that was a real big eye-opening experience when I discovered him. But so he's another one that I really love and look up to in the fusion world. Other Weather Report, I love old school Weather Report quite a bit. I love, and there's a band that I got into thanks to Alan called Gong, which is a really great fusion band from the '70s. Another band that really uses lots of crazy odd meters and has that jazz kind of thing fused with the real heavy guitar. Alan Holdsworth. Alan Holdsworth's another guitar player. Huge fan of him. He one of my favorite albums of his is Secrets. An amazing fusion guitar player and that album features Vinnie Colaiuta, one of the greatest drummers, probably the master of playing that style of music. Tony Williams' Lifetime, huge influence. So we all have like a deep love of a lot of jazz, obviously, and a lot of modern kind of hip hop, electronic stuff, and also like the classics. And the fusion thing is a huge, deep love for me. So we kind of try to take all those, influences and create, kind of our own thing out of it. And, obviously I never feel like it would ever be good as like, listening to our music as like when you put on Intermounting Flame or a Burst of Fire from Mahavishnu Orchestra. But I'd love to hear somehow that music being a big influence on our stuff. If somebody heard our music and be like, oh, that kind of reminds me, like that would be a really wonderful thing. Obviously, it would never be as good as that stuff, but the fusion stuff is a huge influence on that band. So we try to do that in our kind of own weird little way. And we were looking for venues for a while, and it was kind of in some ways I feel like there's a thing with the band where there is a with the hip hop vibe, and it's got a little bit of like I think people who are into maybe the quote unquote some of the jam music that's popular now, jam band thing, could probably dig it because it is instrumental. People who are into jazz, I think, because it has a jazz vibe to it, I think those folks would probably be into it. And obviously the hip hop kind of electronic vibe. Um, but it also goes the other way where the music is pretty dense. There's a lot of things going on, and it's all original. So I think in some ways it can be a little bit on the fringe side. So we had been trying. We've played a lot of gigs over the years. The band's been together for a while, but we were trying to get more of a steady gig, and we eventually got this gig in at Blue in Portland, which is a kind of looked at in regard as being the most popular jazz club in Portland. So we've been fortunate enough to be playing there for every other month. We have like a residency gig there, so we play down there every once a month, every other month down in Portland at Blue, and we play like a 2 hour set. And that gig overall has been really great because it's been a really good workshop for the band to try to develop, and it's also led to us doing other gigs and things. And we have some other bigger things I think coming out of that. We have this recording project that we're going to be doing. We got offered by a record label in Brooklyn, New York, had contacted us a few months ago about going down to record them, and they had heard actually one of our songs that was posted from a gig that we played at Blue, and they contacted us, and they seemed to really dig the music, so they offered they want to work with us. So we're going to be going down to Brooklyn, New York in the late winter, spring time to record there. So that's pretty exciting. So I'm pretty psyched about that. So stay tuned. There'll be more info about that. And so we used to play at Blue, and we still do. We have a gig there another 2 weeks or so, or another week. But right next door to Blue is Abraxas, the place I was talking about. And so I started to, that's how I discovered it. And it was only around for, I think that place was only in existence for like a year. It was really, really rough. And so, but an amazing place. So I've been down there a handful of times, and I bought, dropped some cash there, and now they're closed. But the last time we were down there, I went there and I dropped some little extra cash, a few extra bucks, and so it was an amazing place. So, and then the other place that I buy movies, as far as used movies go, I usually always go to Goodwill. There's a Goodwill here in Belfast that's pretty good, pretty decent. The one in Rockland is really good for their movie selection. I've bought tons of movies there, and they always have tons of great used Blu-rays. I've bought. I tried to hit it up a couple times a month. I'm down in Rockland quite a bit, so I try to hit it up when I can. And I've bought like all kinds of Blu-rays there. I've mostly recently I've bought like a whole bunch of the Marvel movies on Blu-ray, which has been pretty awesome. I got now I have all of the Avenger movies on Blu-ray, which I did a show on. So I have my little spots and my destinations that I go to to buy movies, and Goodwill is the place that I'll go to buy the used movies, and I don't really buy VHS anymore. I don't really buy VHS. I've accumulated a lot. I have a lot of VHS. I have a working player where I can still watch VHS, and I still love VHS, but I typically don't buy it. I typically don't buy VHS anymore just because I'm more driven to buy Blu-rays because the quality and the sound, and then also the longevity of them. They last forever, and they also with the special features aspect, the packaging is really great, and it's mainly just the quality of the audio, and the video is just top notch. So that's what I do, and I've been going to these places a little bit more often, so I acquired a ton of movies. I started going a lot more the last 2 or 3 months, and it's been awesome, and I'm looking forward to going back again. So luckily I've had a little bit extra cash, so I've been doing that, and so I've been cranking out extra reviews because of that, because I've been getting my collection's growing big time. So I'm kind of almost at a place where I'm starting to run out of a little bit of a space to put all the movies. I'm kind of double aisling it, double stacking it now, which isn't really great because if you go in to search out movies, you got to clear out another shelf and look behind them and all that stuff. But it'll all work out. And so I've been cranking out extra reviews and extra content, and so it's been super fun. And I tend to, like most of the movies I do on this channel, I tend to do all the work featuring on movies that I actually own. I don't really do. I used to do trailers of movies way back when, and just if I happened to see something, even if it was something I didn't own, most of the time a lot of times it was movies I didn't own. But now I try to just move it to where it's all movies that I actually own, and it just it seems to be a little bit of an easier way to do it, and plus I can learn a little bit more about the movie, maybe be a little bit more knowledgeable on some of the films that I talk about. So it's very, very cool. It's so funny. It's such a funny thing too, because like I've talked about a lot of things that have happened to kind of inspire me to do these shows. And, talked a lot about my friend Daniel Richmond, and then also my core group of friends that have been really, really encouraging for me to do this whole crazy thing. And they're always very supportive around this stuff, and then also my music stuff, particularly around quantum. And so, and then also other sources of inspirations of where I watch a lot of YouTube guys. I there's a handful of guys that I typically watch, and like I mentioned too, like my friends, really great. They've been a really great support system for these weird things I do. I tend to do things that are, like with Quantum, and then also with this Film Fanatic channel. I kind of consider the stuff to be always on the fringe side of things, so it's not really all out of a commercial. It doesn't have this outwardly all-inclusive kind of commercial application to it. I tend to do things that are, or everything has a little bit of a fringe or slightly strange kind of tinge to it. And that's just like naturally how I flow. We're like the same thing with Quantum, that we have that kind of, I think there's a pop element. There's hopefully there's lots of different elements, and there's always a sense of melody. But I'm very much into kind of fringe, avant-garde, experimental stuff, and even music that's kind of considered noise. Groups like Wapstan and Pharmacon, where it's like really harsh and kind of like purely based on this kind of primal thing. So I'm very influenced by that music too. That's and then also jazz groups like Sun Ra and whatnot. So like I have that kind of thing, and then also my movie tastes are the same thing. They're kind of eclectic. I like things that are on the fringe side, things that kind of push the envelope. So I kind of always have that, like it's like a ping pong thing going on with my taste. And I try to, even though I know that's a thing of where it can be alienating for some people or too much for certain people, I kind of feel like, well, it's something I really love, so I try to, repurpose it and maybe try to make that work for me. So anyway, so I, tend to always focus on those things in that way. And another big source of inspiration for me for trying to take this step and to try to like build, upon the Facebook page, Film Fanatic, and then also the Instagram page, and to try to do this whole YouTube thing, was I watch a lot of YouTube guys, and there's about 3 guys that I really, really like a lot. And but I check out a lot of other guys, and there's a few people that I watch pretty regularly, but I'm always, I don't know what it is. It's funny. I'm always on the fence about most of the things that they say. And whenever I watch any of their shows, it's really funny because most of the stuff that they cover, and most of the YouTube guys I watch, are guys that cover horror movies. You know, it's a lot of slasher movies, a lot of newer horror films, and then also a lot of the old school films that I've been doing. And I've learned a lot. My favorite guy is Moods, who's a Canadian guy. He's tremendous because he's got so much stuff going on, so much content, he's so knowledgeable, but he's got this tremendously deep. He's got this tremendous sense of knowledge about certain directors. You know, for example, Lucio Fulci. He'll do a show on Lucio Fulci. You know, the great Italian director, my favorite Italian director. He'll do like a 3-hour show on him, and he'll talk about everything, and it's intense and it's amazing because it's a super deep dive. And like I always said, it's like if you like movies like Hereditary, or there's a movie that I really want to see, I've heard is really great, Barbarian, or for me the most recent movie that I really loved a lot was X. You like a lot of contemporary stuff, I'm always about, well, check out where a lot of the stuff, where this whole crazy genre that we all love, horror and exploitation movies, where all that stuff kind of came from, and slasher films. Take a deep dive and see where that stuff kind of came from. So Moods does an amazing job with really taking these deep dives in, a lot of European cinema, horror films, Italian horror films, a lot of obscure American films. One guy I really got into, which is going to be the topic of the show, or which is the topic of the show, is a director I just recently got into and I really love, and I've been buying lots of his films, is Jess Franco. An amazing, exploitation director, Spanish director. And I love his stuff. And his stuff is, all over the place. He'll do these total Giallo mystery suspense films, but then he'll do these completely insane supernatural horror films, and then he'll do almost films that would be considered like art house, kind of like melodramas, but they all have that kind of gritty vibe to them. And so it's he's a director. I never had seen any of his work, really. I probably had seen a few of his films when I was growing up, but he's, as a director, he's a guy I just recently discovered, and he's one of my favorites right now. And he's got so many movies, but that discovering him was through the way I discovered him was through Moods, because he takes extreme deep dives in all things horror and in the exploitation world, and I love that stuff. That's my favorite kind of thing. And then my other guy that I really like a lot, love a lot, is Chris Stuckman, and he does a lot of newer films, but he's great, and that's how I've gotten turned on over the last few years on, that's how I found out about X, and also the remake of The Invisible Man, which came out a few years ago, which I think is an amazing movie, and I'll eventually do a show on that. He does a lot of coverage of more modern films. He also does a lot of old school films, but he typically does a lot of newer kind of horror films. But he's great, and he's really smart. Both these guys are really smart, and they're fair. I like what they do because they cover lots of different things. They also cover lots of things of where they're you could consider them, they're not necessarily horror films, but with Moods he'll do lots of work on talking about a lot of these exploitation films that are not necessarily horror films, like a lot of sex exploitation films, a lot of these Giallo films that have come out, a lot of foreign films, really obscure films. He primarily has his focus on horror films, but he does mix it up, and he does documentaries too. So, but and then Chris Stuckman does a lot of films also that are not part of the horror genre, but overall, that's kind of his jam too. But the thing that I love about them is that they're not, and obviously, not everybody's going to agree on everybody's got their own taste, and everybody should be, aware of that, and that's, and people should like what they like and not like what they like, and that's totally fine. But the thing that I love about those guys is they do this thing of where when they're talking about a film and they're really excited about it or they really love it, they give a really good kind of case for it, and like it's something that they're passionate about, and they give a good kind of synopsis as to why they feel like those ingredients are there for that film to make it great. And also, if it's a film that they don't like, they seem to really do a thing of where it's basically the same thing. They lay out a good kind of discussion as to why they feel the film doesn't work. And there's a ton of films that they'll get to or that they'll review that obviously they don't like, and films that I might like, or in my own taste maybe I disagree with what they say. But they do it in a way of where it's articulate, it's smart, and it's respectful, and it's not. They don't give this rebuttal about why they don't like something or why they like something in this like kind of dumbed down, narrow-minded view. Like they give a legitimate argument either way, or reason as to why they view something or like something, or they don't. But they do it in a respectful way. They don't really get into the whole thing of where they trash directors. They don't disrespect filmmakers, or do these things of where it's almost comes across. They don't do this thing of where it comes across as, well, they'll pick a movie that they don't like, or whatnot, and they'll just kind of trash it as much as they can and kind of take a shit on it as much as they can, and they kind of use that angle as the selling point for people to come and check out their videos. They don't do that. They're not involved with that. They don't come across as juvenile in any way. They're passionate and they're knowledgeable and they care about what they do, and that's what I love about them, is they can not like something but give a legitimate reason as to why they don't like it. And my buddy Sean Russell, who is a guest on Film Fanatic, and he's an amazing guy, an amazing musician, and he was a real pivotal guy for me, or he really introduced me to lots of great films and filmmakers and lots of great music, and kind of helped shape me into where I am now. And one of his things is he generally, I've talked to him about it, about, I like tell him I'm checking out this guy on YouTube that I really dig, and he pretty much stays away from it because he feels like it's all a lot of crap, a lot of garbage, and that it's really about a lot of guys that, they have all of this stuff of where they just kind of get involved with like trashing things, and they're not really that articulate. They're not very fair, and they kind of use this negative stance that they take on things as like the selling point, and they are and so he, and they're not really great at what they do. If you take away all the bells and whistles of, like, say, if they have a really good production, they do all this great editing, and visually their pages look really, or their channels look really appealing. If you strip it away, it's just kind of a lot of BS, and it's not really quality, and they're not really about expressing in a relatively fair and articulate way as to why they like something or they don't like something. And they don't really have the knowledge to maybe explain where they're coming from, or maybe some of the films that they love or don't love came from. So whereas these guys, Moods and Chris Stuckman, have that. So he basically doesn't watch anything on YouTube because he feels like the majority of people on YouTube get involved with that that whole kind of clickbait. Let's like take a dump on something, but we'll do it in such a way of where we'll do it in this really brass kind of bully. We'll use these kind of almost like bully tactics. We'll the more and then also come across as like just a big fat meathead and kind of ignorant, but use that as this angle of like, well, that's why you should like my videos. So he stays away from it, and I totally understand that. And a lot of times there's like a handful of other guys that I check out. There's about 3 guys that I said I really, really love. Chris Stuckman and Moods being my favorite. And they're both very, very different, which I like. They both do very, very different. Their focus is very different on what films they cover. So, but I check out a lot of other guys quite a bit, and there's a few guys that I subscribe to, and and whatnot, and they're growing, and some of them are really big. But there's a lot of times where I watch their channels, and I'm just like, I kind of can't believe these guys are as big as they are. I'm kind of like, there's times where I'm watching their videos and I just kind of get angry and I just kind of get frustrated, and I'm like, why am I watching this? Like, why am I doing this? Like, I feel like I'm wasting my time. And a lot of times I can't make it through a video. And then like a couple weeks later, I might check out another video of theirs. And it's a funny thing because when I'm watching these guys, Chris Stuckman and Moods, I never have that feeling. I never have, like, I get a sense, and they can lay out a good case as to why they like something or don't like something. And it's not like I never get fired up in that way of like, what is going on here, But there's a couple of guys that I've been watching, and there's a lot of times where I'm just like, how the hell are these guys popular? One in particular, I'm not going to say names, but one or two in particular they're huge YouTube guys, and they do all movie reviews, all horror movies, and I'm just like astounded by. There's times where I'm like, the level of ignorance that these guys have, and how incredibly dismissive they are, because something they might review, or somebody suggests the movie to them, they dismiss it, of where they're just like, well, it's essentially, oh, that movie's just too weird, or it's it doesn't make any sense, or it's too weird, or it's too all over the place, and they'll just dismiss it, and they'll just like basically take a big shit on it. And so I get really frustrated. Like one example is this one guy who I won't mention, he's a huge YouTube guy, and he did this whole show. Like, he typically does, he has a pretty good range of movies that he does. Like, he does a lot of newer horror films, and he does do a lot of slasher films, which is really cool. He'll cover movies from the 80s. Like, he'll do lots of films, like movies like Phantasm, Sleepaway Camp. He does some old school stuff, which is really cool. But really anything before that, he won't really dive into. And he did a show where he was a guest on a channel, and they were talking about slasher films and more of the old school horror films. And he was talking about how his buddies are really into, a lot of the Italian horror films. Dario Argento, Bruno Mattei, Lucio Fulci, a lot of the old school kind of horror exploitation films, and they're really into that. And they've tried to like show him those movies and bring that into light, saying, well, you like horror movies, take a deep dive and see where a lot of this stuff came from, and a lot, and there's like, millions of those Italian horror films out there. Especially now, they're like easier to find. And I remember him talking about that on this podcast, and he just basically said, uh, well, it's really not for me. He's like, you can't understand why people, basically cream their shorts over Dario Argento movies or Lucio Fulci. He didn't even know like half the directors. Like he couldn't really even name any of the Italian directors, and he basically said, well, it's just this like low budget crap that doesn't really go anywhere, and it's all like bad writing, it's terrible direction, and he doesn't understand why people love this stuff, and he just has this like totally dismissive attitude towards like directors like Dario Argento or Lucio Fulci, and and he doesn't even give it respect, and it's like, and I just like when he does those things, I'm just like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. He comes across as a meathead, and he's completely ignorant. Um, he's done that with reviews also around newer films that I liked a lot, that I think are really innovative. And he'll essentially, his argument for not liking the film is essentially, well, it's just weird, and it's like, it doesn't make sense. It's too weird. It like kind of makes me think a little too much, so it's crap. And he just like totally dismisses it, and just like trashes it basically. And I'm just like, that's so ignorant. And there's another guy that I watch who does the same thing. Well, he'll pick a few movies that I really love, and it's not a case of whether or not he even likes it or not, because it's great to have different opinions. Like the world would be boring if everybody had the same opinion. But he'll do the same thing of where he'll just, if he doesn't like it, he'll go in this direction where he kind of comes across as like a little bit of a bully, but he's just completely dismissive of it. He doesn't give it any props. He doesn't even really acknowledge that there is something here, or something special, or maybe this movie was, maybe an inspiration to other films, um, or gives it some kind of props without liking it. Um, or give it some kind of respect. He'll just trash it and he'll just dismiss it. And he just kind of comes across as like this kind of angry, old man. And I'm like, how do these guys get the hits that they get? How do they get the shows and the views that they get? And I don't usually engage with people like that. I try not to. But every now and then I do. And I did engage a couple times with these guys on YouTube about um, the level of, I feel that they sometimes when they don't like something, and I said, well, first of all, like when I addressed one or two of these guys, I've addressed them twice, and it's like, you know, I basically said, this is not an argument or a case of like of I'm saying this or responding to this because I don't like, because you didn't like the same movie I liked. It's nothing to do has nothing to do with whether you like something or you don't like something. It's about the way you come across, and it's the dismissive attitude, and you're just like, well, it's not for me. It doesn't exist. It doesn't matter. Just throw it in the garbage. That's an entirely different argument, and an ignorant argument, as far as I'm concerned, as far as reviewing or talking about music or films. And I remember saying to one of the guys when I did engage, and of course he didn't respond, and that's fine. But I said, well, first of all, it's not a question of whether you like something or not. That's fine. You can like whatever you like, and you can hate whatever you hate, or not, or dislike whatever you dislike. But I said it's the overall very dismissive attitude that you have towards lots of directors and films, and you also come across as a little bit of, I didn't actually say it, but I said it's mainly focused on your dismissive attitude, and that you kind of come across as a little bit of, you come across very ignorant about those things. And I had said, and I always use this analogy. I said like, and I said this in when I had responded to one of the videos. I said, I started off saying, okay, it's not a case of if you like something or not, but I just feel like you have this very generalized view of certain films or filmmakers, and if you don't like it, you just completely dismiss it. You don't, and you have this totally dismissive attitude, and you don't give it any kind of legitimacy at all, or give it any kind of props. And I had said an analogy that I use a lot is, and it's a music analogy, but I feel like it is kind of how my brain works. And I said, for example, making the music analogy, I'm not a really big like Grateful Dead fan, and I live in Maine, and I play in about two bands that we do a few Grateful Dead covers, and I know in those bands a couple of the guys in the band are really really into Fish and Grateful Dead, and those bands are huge here in New England and in Maine, especially in Maine. There's tons of bands doing, tons of musicians covering their material, so it's everywhere, And I made in this statement, this response, I said, well, it's like I'm taking an analogy of like I'm not a really huge, I'm not a Grateful Dead fan at all. Like I'm not. It's not something I really like at all. I don't really. It's not something I ever listen to. I don't really enjoy some of their music. I don't enjoy their music very much, but at the same time, I completely respect them. You know, and I said individually, I've always thought Jerry Garcia, for instance, is a really great guitar player. Mickey Hart, the drummer, really great percussionist. And but my own personal taste, I just don't really like that music. There's certain things about it that, to a degree, turn me off. That being said, I will say, I'll be the first to say and defend them as a, a real significant force in the music industry. I said, even though I don't like it, I respect what they've done because they created this music legacy that has like influenced, so many artists. They did a lot of things as far as kind of being an independent artist and an independent band before many, many other bands. And they created this like, legacy and this like kind of dynasty that commands respect. And so I don't, because I don't like them, I don't say that they're crap and that, I just dismiss them and throw them in the trash. It's like, no, what these guys did was really innovative as a whole, and that commands respect. And I'm going to give them those props because of the legacy that they left behind. And I said, that's for me is a different argument than saying, well, I don't like them and they're just trash and I'm just going to crap on them and just dismiss them and not give them any props. Because for me to do that and to take that attitude is really ignorant, and I feel really shows my incompetence of being open-minded and trying to be respectful. And these guys do that, I feel, all the time with music and artists. And I feel like this one guy in particular did this with all of, when he was talking about Italian cinema and how he did try checking out a lot of movies, and he just totally didn't give it any props. He shit all over it and then just dismissed it as something to be thrown in the trash. And I'm like, that's completely ignorant, and you just come across as a big giant fat meathead, and you don't know what you're talking about because you can't give a legitimate argument. And again, it has nothing to do with whether you like something or not, but you're just completely not giving respect, because what those Italian directors did was legendary. Lucio Fulci created a legacy, and and he'll be one of the biggest names in Italian cinema forever because he created this legacy and an amazing, huge, huge body of work that's influenced millions of films and filmmakers. So, same thing like with the Grateful Dead analogy. You might not like it, but it commands respect. So that's one of the things that I see with YouTube is there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that, and I feel like that's the prevailing attitude towards something that you don't like. Is that because you don't like it, you don't give respect to something, and I think that's just at the end of the day just really stupid, really dumb, and that drives me crazy. again, Chris Stuckman moods, they never do that. They don't do that, and that's to me where it's at. But anyway, I will stop talking about that. So I have been on this really great kick of watching a lot of Jess Franco movies, and I just discovered this movie here, um, the other side of the mirror. I got this on Blu-ray just really recently, a couple weeks ago, and my God, what an awesome movie! It was directed by Jess Franco, 1974, and it's a Spanish film. He was the Spanish director, and this is a total like the last film I reviewed was more of a Giallo film, and this is very much a Giallo film. Also, it's very much like uh, like a suspense thriller, but there's very much there. But it's also, I would say, I would consider this definitely a horror based film too. It's definitely it's a Giallo kind of horror slash exploitation film, and it's amazing. I mean, I've never seen this before. My first time, I bought it on a whim. Like I said in the beginning of the show, I just recently discovered Jess Franco. I had heard a lot about him the last few months, and then I bought a few of his films, and I have a pretty good amount of his films now. The first one that I bought of his was Angel of Death, which is this killer movie. It's like a Nazi exploitation film, and so I bought quite a few of his other movies since then, and I just bought this one, and man, this movie is just awesome. I was just like, after I watched it for the first time last night, and after I got done watching, I was like, damn, that was good. Like it's a super mysterious movie. It's a Giallo film, so it has it's very much like a thriller. Um, but it's also got these tremendous like kind of horror elements, and it's a really great story. And it's one of those films where the story essentially is about this woman, this girl who it's kind of starts out following her where she's about to get married, and and she has this. I guess it's hard to tell, like, 'cause it's very mysterious, but she has this kind of complicated relationship with her father, and it starts off about the film starts off about starts with their relationship. You kind of get a picture of like this daughter and and her father. They have this kind of weird dynamic, but they overall have a lot of love and respect. And she's about to get married, and and as they get close to to her getting married, out of the blue, her father kills himself and he hangs himself, and it happens within, I don't know, 10 minutes or so into the film, and it's kind of shocking because you don't expect it. And she goes to his house, and finds him. She finds, like, because he's hung himself, and she finds him there. Um, and it's actually, uh, right around the time of her wedding. And then a few months after that, she ends up like getting these. She starts hearing these voices, and you get this indication that this girl might have had a history of some kind of mental illness. But then you realize, well, it seems like the father is basically reaching out to her from the dead. And there's all these scenarios of where she's by herself or she's hearing these voices, and she starts seeing her father after he's killed himself, and she starts, and this ends up leading to her having these visions of where she starts basically murdering people, killing people, and 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 she's in her visions and in her dreams, she's being told by her father to kill these people. And it's really great. It's like the atmosphere is awesome and super creepy, and then it does this. It has this amazing thing of where it like totally totes that line of, is this something she's really experiencing? Is it really her father beyond the grave? Is like this, this ghost? Is he really getting in touch with her and really, making her kill these people, or is he really in contact with her? And then the other side of it is she actually, because her visions of where she's killing these men get more intense. And then there's things in the movie where there are a series of murders that actually happen. And so it rides this line of where, well, maybe is she actually becoming the serial killer? Or is she, uh, you know, clearly having this total mental breakdown and these things aren't really happening? And it does this awesome thing. The way the narrative in the movie is like it can be, it can be, it could almost be in any area of, like, it could be fantasy or reality, and you're not really sure. It's in this weird gray zone, and it does an awesome job of that. One of the things that kind of reminded me of, even though it's a very different film, but as far as where it could be, it could be like a total mental breakdown, or it could be, you know, a real reality of where that person is being in contact, or where these ghosts or spirits are actually contacting this person. It kind of reminded me of The Shining, because The Shining, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining with Jack Nicholson, that film could very much be a thing of where, he is being told by these spirits to basically become a killer, or is he just really having, and he's actually committing these acts, or is he just having this like grand, or is he just losing his mind and he's committing these acts, or is it really something based out of the supernatural? And this film does that a lot with these visions that she has with her father, and it's awesome and very mysterious. There's a lot of great music. She's also a piano player. The main character, this girl, she is a piano player in these jazz groups. So there's like a lot of great scenes of her like in these different clubs playing music with music. Playing with her jazz band, and it's great because there's a lot of long cuts of these scenes, and the music's really great and beautifully shot. It's got those great characteristics of a classic Giallo film, where there's like all these beautiful shots, all the colors pop. There's some amazing camera angles in this film. The cinematography is amazing, and it's got that total like Giallo thing of where it's very suspenseful, and it has all these interesting plot twist, and it plays out like a mystery, and just a great, awesome movie. Totally psyched that I bought this, and it came out in '74, and I'm this is maybe the third or fourth film I've done on this channel about Jess Franco, and man, he's emerging as one of my favorite directors right now, and this film, The Other Side of the Mirror, is also on the Mondo Cabra label, and I've been doing a lot of films off of this label, and this company is just awesome. This might be my favorite company because they really do they have this tremendous catalog of all these totally obscure movies, and they just have a huge catalog. All these like great exploitation Giallo horror films, just amazing. This is one of the best I've seen in a while. Like, James Franco is amazing, and there's a really great interview which I just started. Stephen Brower, who is an amazing journalist and also an amazing artist all around. But he's a walking encyclopedia as far in regards to all things exploitation, and there's like a whole hour interview where he covers Jess Franco, and just awesome. It's super fascinating. I just started it last night. But The Other Side of the Mirror, directed by Jess Franco, 1974. Amazing movie. Pure Giallo horror exploitation. Definitely check this out. And thanks again, everybody, for the support and checking out the videos. I've been loving it. They've been getting more and more views, and stay tuned. We got more stuff coming your way, and we'll keep this train rolling. So thank you again. This is Jason Dean. Have a wonderful day. Peace.